In the year 2158, humanity had established its first intergalactic colony on a distant planet called Xyron. The world was new, untouched, and full of possibilities. Yet, despite the promises of peace and prosperity, not all was as ideal as it seemed. On the surface, the colony appeared to thrive. There were towering structures made of shining metal, vibrant green parks, and humans coexisting with alien species. But behind the perfect facade, a dark cloud loomed over one of the orphanages where children from across the galaxy were being cared for. One of these children was Zuri, an alien girl with translucent purple skin and large, luminous eyes. Her people, the Zorians, had been wiped out during a brutal war, leaving her as one of the last survivors. Zuri had been rescued by a team of human soldiers and brought to the colony in hopes of giving her a new life. She had been placed in the care of the Xyron orphanage, a place that promised safety and care. However, there was one problem: Zuri's nightmares. Every night, Zuri would wake up screaming in terror, thrashing in her bed, unable to escape the horrors that plagued her dreams. The nightmares were vivid and terrifying, filled with images of her home planet burning, her family's screams echoing in her ears, and dark figures chasing her through the ruins of her world. These terrifying visions never seemed to end, and each night, Zuri would wake up drenched in sweat, gasping for air, with no one able to calm her. The staff at the orphanage tried everything they could think of to help her. Doctors, sleep specialists, even telepathic healers were brought in to try and ease the young girl's troubled mind. They hooked her up to machines that monitored her brainwaves while she slept, but all that was revealed was that her nightmares were real to her, far too real. The specialists suggested a variety of treatments, from advanced therapy sessions to administering calming medication, but nothing worked. Zuri's terror never stopped. The staff felt helpless. Every night they would rush to her room when her screams echoed through the hallways. They would comfort her, but it was never enough. Her tears and cries would fill the air, making the whole orphanage feel like a place of sadness rather than hope. The caretakers, while kind and well-meaning, began to feel worn down. They had no answers, no solutions, and slowly they gave up on trying to fix the unfixable. Zuri was left in the hands of the most advanced systems and techniques, but those things didn't have what she needed most: human connection. And so, while the experts continued their studies, it was in the most unlikely place that Zuri found comfort. Not from the alien psychologists, nor the machines that monitored her every move, but from a simple man who worked as the orphanage's janitor. Jack was a man in his late 30s, with short-cropped hair and a weathered face that carried the marks of years spent in hard work. He wasn't anyone important, not by Xyron's standards. He didn't have a title, nor did he possess any great skills that would set him apart from the rest. Jack was just a janitor, a humble man who did his job day in and day out, cleaning the orphanage's halls and ensuring everything was in order. But if you asked anyone who worked with him, they'd tell you that Jack was one of the kindest, most thoughtful people they knew. He was a single father, raising his young daughter Lily, who had been born on Xyron. Jack's wife had passed away a few years ago, leaving him to raise Lily on his own. He often felt the weight of the world on his shoulders as he juggled the responsibilities of fatherhood and his work, but Jack always smiled through it, for Lily was the light of his life. He often spent his breaks reading stories to her or taking her to the park where they would play together. Life was hard, but Jack made it work. Zuri had seen Jack around the orphanage for months. He was always there, sweeping the floors or wiping down the windows. He never seemed to be in a hurry, and he always greeted the children with a soft smile. Zuri never spoke to him, but there was something about him that comforted her. Perhaps it was the way he treated everyone equally, no matter their status or species. Jack didn't care whether you were human or alien. To him, everyone deserved kindness. One night, after yet another terrifying nightmare, Zuri sat by the window in the hallway, staring out at the stars. The lights of the orphanage were dim, and the quiet was almost unsettling. Zuri's heart was still racing from her dreams, and she felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness. She had no family left, no home, no one to turn to for comfort. The other children had their own families, their own species, but she was different. She didn't belong here. Jack passed by her carrying a cleaning cart and noticed the girl sitting alone in the dark. His heart ached as he saw her face, pale and distant, like she was lost in another world. Jack stopped for a moment, looking down at Zuri. He had seen her upset before, but tonight it was different. She was more withdrawn, more broken than usual. "Are you okay, Zuri?" Jack asked gently, crouching down to her level. His voice was calm, soothing like the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. Zuri didn't look up at him. She simply nodded, though her tear-streaked face told another story. Jack hesitated for a moment, then sat down next to her. He didn't need to say much. He simply offered her his presence. They sat there in silence for a while, watching the stars twinkle in the distance. "You know," Jack began after a long pause, "back on Earth, people used to tell stories to each other. Stories of survival, of hope, and of strength. Sometimes a story can help put things into perspective." Zuri looked at him now, her large eyes filled with curiosity. She didn't understand exactly what he meant, but there was something comforting about the sound of his voice. It wasn't like the other caretakers. It wasn't full of pity or clinical language. It was just simple, real. Jack smiled softly. "I have a story for you if you want to hear it. It's a story from my planet Earth. It's about a people who faced the worst but still found a way to rise up." Zuri nodded slowly. She didn't have anything else to hold on to. Why not listen to his story? Jack cleared his throat and began. He told her about Earth's history, how humanity had once been divided, torn apart by war and conflict, yet still found ways to rebuild, to stand strong. He told her of the great leaders, the simple people, and the incredible journeys of survival. He spoke of humanity's resilience, of their ability to adapt and grow despite the darkest of times. It was a simple story, but it was one that carried weight. Zuri listened intently, her fears slowly melting away. For the first time, she felt connected to something bigger than herself. She felt a strange sense of hope stirring within her. Jack didn't have the answers to her nightmares, but in his words, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of peace. When Jack finished the story, he gave her a gentle smile. "You see, Zuri, sometimes when life gets tough, we have to remember that even the darkest days can lead to brighter ones. Just like the people in my story, we can find our strength again, even after losing everything." Zuri's heart was still racing, but now it was different. It was no longer filled with fear. It was filled with something else, something she hadn't experienced in a long time. She felt safe. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she could overcome the nightmares. As the night grew quiet again, Zuri slowly stood up, wiping the last of her tears away. She felt lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She gave Jack a small smile, one that was hesitant but genuine. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jack simply nodded, smiling back at her. He didn't need words. He had done something more important. He had given her the gift of hope. And with that, Zuri finally closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of Jack's simple story in her heart. And for the first time in a long while, she fell into a peaceful sleep. The next day, the sun rose over the colony of Xiron, casting a soft, golden light across the wide streets and towering buildings. The city hummed with the usual activity of a thriving, intergalactic community. People from all walks of life rushing to their daily tasks, alien species mingling with humans, and the quiet hum of the technology that powered the colony. Yet within the walls of the Xiron orphanage, something was different. For the first time in months, Zuri woke up to a calm morning. The usual screams and nightmares that had plagued her sleep were absent. She opened her eyes slowly, unsure if what had happened the night before was real or just a fleeting dream. But as she lay there, the feeling of peace in her chest was undeniable. She felt lighter. Like the weight of the darkness that had consumed her mind for so long had lifted. Zuri looked around her room. The pale light from the window bathed the space in a soft glow. She sat up slowly, stretching her arms above her head. She had slept through the night without waking up in fear. She couldn't remember the last time that had happened. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt this calm. The nightmares, those terrifying images of her destroyed home and the faces of the people she had lost, seemed so distant now. For the first time, they didn't seem as real as they once had. With a sense of cautious curiosity, Zuri slipped out of bed and walked to the window. She looked out at the city below. The bustling life outside seemed so far removed from the pain that had filled her world for so long. It was like stepping into a new life, a world where she wasn't just a broken, frightened girl. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to change. Down the hall, Jack was doing his usual rounds, sweeping the floors and tidying up the messes that accumulated throughout the day. His movements were slow and deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. He always took his time with his work, never rushing, never complaining. There was something peaceful about the way he approached everything, as though he understood that even the simplest tasks had their own value. When Jack passed Zuri's room, he noticed the door was slightly ajar. He had grown used to the sounds of her nightmares at night, the echoes of her cries piercing through the walls. But today, the silence was different. It was peaceful, almost serene. Jack paused for a moment, unsure if he was imagining it. He knocked lightly on the door, a gentle sound that seemed to echo in the otherwise quiet hallway. "Zuri," Jack called softly. "You awake?" There was a pause, and then Zuri's voice came from inside the room, calm and steady. "Yes," she replied, her voice carrying a quiet warmth that Jack hadn't heard before. "I'm awake." Jack smiled, relieved to hear her calm voice. He opened the door slowly and stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. Zuri was standing by the window, looking out at the city. She seemed different, more relaxed, less tense. Her usual sadness seemed to have faded, replaced by something quieter, more content. "You slept well, I see," Jack said, his voice filled with kindness. Zuri turned to him, a hesitant smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Yes, I did," she said. "I didn't have any bad dreams." Jack's heart lifted. He had been worried that his simple story from the night before had just been a temporary comfort, something that wouldn't last. But now, seeing Zuri so calm, so at ease, he felt a sense of hope for the first time in a long while. "That's great to hear," Jack said, stepping closer. "I'm glad you're feeling better." Zuri nodded but didn't say anything more. She didn't know how to explain what she was feeling. How could she? How could she put into words the way the nightmares had haunted her, and how a simple story from a man she barely knew had changed everything? But Jack understood. He didn't need her to explain. He could see it in her eyes, the peace, the stillness that had replaced the fear. Jack had always believed that sometimes the simplest things were the most powerful. A story, a kind word, a moment of connection. These were the things that could make the difference when everything else seemed hopeless. For the next few days, Zuri continued to sleep peacefully. The nightmares didn't return. She felt a new sense of calmness inside her, a sense of strength she hadn't known she possessed. She began to feel more like a child again, more like the girl she had been before the war had taken everything from her. She spent more time with Jack as well, listening to his stories about Earth, about human history. Jack didn't rush his tales. He spoke slowly, thoughtfully, choosing his words carefully. He spoke of great battles, of people who had endured unimaginable hardships and come out stronger on the other side. He told Zuri of the heroes who had risen from the ashes of their broken world, and of the ordinary people who had made extraordinary choices. Zuri listened intently. There was something about the way Jack spoke that made everything seem possible. His stories weren't just about human history, they were about resilience, about the power of the human spirit to overcome anything. He didn't make it sound like a fairy tale. He made it sound real, and that was what Zuri needed to hear. She needed to hear that she, too, could survive, that she could rise above the trauma that had nearly broken her. As the days passed, Zuri began to feel stronger. She still missed her home, still felt the ache of loss deep in her heart, but it no longer controlled her. The nightmares were gone, and with them, the overwhelming fear that had paralyzed her. Instead, she felt a quiet strength growing inside her, a strength that Jack had helped her discover. One evening, after another story, Zuri turned to Jack and spoke for the first time about her past. She told him of her planet, of the life she had known before the war. She spoke of her family, her mother and father who had been kind and loving, always there to comfort her when she was scared. She told Jack about the day the war came, about the explosions that shook her world, the people who fought and died in the streets. Her voice trembled as she spoke of the destruction, the chaos, and the moment she had been taken away from her home, the last time she had seen her parents. Jack listened, never interrupting. He didn't know what to say. How could he? How could anyone understand what Zuri had been through? But he didn't need to have all the answers. Sometimes just listening was enough. When Zuri finished speaking, she looked up at Jack, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know what to do with all of this," she said softly. "It's too much. I feel like I'm carrying it all with me all the time." Jack smiled gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to carry it alone, Zuri," he said, "and you don't have to carry it forever. You're strong, stronger than you think, and you've already taken the first step just by facing it." Zuri looked up at Jack, her eyes filled with gratitude. For the first time, she didn't feel so alone. She felt like there was hope. Like maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild her life piece by piece. From that day on, Zuri's healing continued. She still had her struggles, still had moments of sadness, but they were no longer all-consuming. The nightmares stayed away, replaced by a sense of calm and hope. Zuri had found something that she hadn't even known she was looking for: humanity's ability to heal, to connect, and to offer hope in the darkest of times. Jack, too, found something in his work that he hadn't expected. He had always believed in the power of kindness and patience, but seeing Zuri's transformation filled him with a sense of pride and purpose that he hadn't felt in a long time. He had helped her heal in his own quiet way, and it made all the difference. The orphanage staff, seeing the change in Zuri, began to take notice. They began to realize that sometimes the answers didn't come from the most advanced technologies or the most expensive treatments. Sometimes the answers were simple. Sometimes all it took was a story, a moment of connection, and the willingness to listen. As Zuri continued to grow stronger, she began to share her own stories with the other children at the orphanage. She spoke of her home, of the people she had lost, and of the strength she had found in the simplest of things. Her story became a beacon of hope for others, just as Jack's story had been for her. And in that small, quiet corner of the universe, Zuri found the peace she had longed for, the peace that came from within, from the simple acts of kindness and understanding that made all the difference. Weeks passed, and Zuri's life at the Xiron orphanage began to change in ways she never thought possible. The nightmares that had once ruled her nights were now nothing more than distant memories. The fear, the constant dread that had made her tremble in the dark, seemed to have lost its grip on her. In its place, something new had taken root, a quiet confidence, a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Zuri spent her days playing with the other children at the orphanage. She had always kept to herself before, afraid of the others' pity, afraid of their questions about her past. But now, she found herself opening up, not just to Jack, but to the children around her. They didn't see her as the last of a lost race. They saw her as a friend, a companion. They didn't ask her about the war or the destruction she had witnessed. Instead, they played games, shared laughter, and simply enjoyed each other's company. It was an ordinary afternoon when Zuri found herself sitting in the small courtyard, watching the other children run around. The sun shone brightly overhead, casting warm rays over the green grass. The sounds of happy chatter filled the air. It was a peaceful scene, one that Zuri never thought she would experience again. Jack was nearby, taking a break from his janitorial duties. He had become a quiet fixture in Zuri's life, always there when she needed him, always ready with a story or a kind word. Today, he was sitting on the edge of the fountain, watching the children play with a smile on his face. Zuri walked over to him, her steps light, her heart no longer burdened by the weight of her past. "Hey, Jack," she said softly, sitting down next to him. Jack turned to her with a smile. "Hey, Zuri, how's everything going today?" Zuri hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Good," she said. "It's been really good. I feel different, like I'm starting to heal." Jack's smile widened. "I'm glad to hear that." Zuri glanced at the other children, who were running around the courtyard, laughing and playing. She watched as they interacted with one another, completely unaware of the darkness she had once carried. They were free from the weight of their pasts, able to enjoy their childhood without fear or pain. Zuri wondered, for a moment, if she would ever be able to fully let go of her past. Would she always carry the memories of her destroyed home with her? Would she always feel like an outsider, a stranger in a world that wasn't hers? But as she sat there, watching the other children, she realized that she didn't have to hold onto those memories forever. She didn't have to let her past define her. She had the power to choose her future, to shape the person she wanted to become. And right now, that person was someone who could find peace, even in the aftermath of loss. As Jack looked at Zuri, he could see the change in her. The weight she had carried for so long had lifted. She was no longer the broken girl who had come to the orphanage with empty eyes and a heart full of fear. She was becoming something stronger, something better. And it wasn't just because of the stories he had told her. It was because Zuri had found her own strength. She had found the courage to face her past and begin to heal. For the next few days, Zuri began to share her story with the other children. She didn't go into great detail, but she spoke of her home, her family, and the destruction she had witnessed. The other children listened intently, not out of pity, but because they understood the importance of her story. They didn't judge her. They didn't see her as a victim. They saw her as a survivor, a person who had endured unimaginable pain and had come out the other side stronger. Zuri's story became a source of inspiration for the other children. They began to see that no matter how hard life could be, there was always hope. There was always a way forward. They didn't have to be defined by their circumstances. They, too, could overcome their challenges and grow stronger in the process. But it wasn't just the children who were impacted by Zuri's journey. The orphanage staff, too, began to take notice. They had seen Zuri's transformation firsthand, and it made them rethink their approach to helping the children. They realized that sometimes the answers didn't lie in advanced technology or cutting-edge treatments. Sometimes the answers were simpler. Sometimes all it took was a story, a moment of connection, and the willingness to listen. The staff started to implement Jack's approach in other parts of the orphanage. They encouraged the children to share their stories, to talk about their pasts, and to listen to one another. They created a safe space where the children could express themselves without fear of judgment. And slowly, the orphanage became a place of healing, not just for Zuri, but for all the children who called it home. One day, as the sun began to set and the stars started to twinkle in the sky, Jack sat down with Zuri by the window. They had become accustomed to these quiet moments together, where words were unnecessary and simply being in each other's company was enough. Zuri looked out at the stars, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the evening. For the first time, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The stars were no longer just distant points of light in the sky. They were symbols of hope, of a future she could build for herself. She had come to understand that no matter where she was from or what she had lost, she could still find her place in this world. She could still make a difference. "Thank you, Jack," Zuri said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. Jack turned to her, surprised. "For what?" "For everything," Zuri replied. "For helping me see that I don't have to carry my past forever. For showing me that there's always hope, even when it feels like there is. I don't know what I would have done without you." Jack smiled softly, his heart swelling with pride. "You did it, Zuri. You found your strength. All I did was remind you of it." Zuri nodded, her heart full. She had finally come to understand something she had never known before, that healing wasn't just about forgetting the past. It was about accepting it, facing it head-on, and choosing to move forward. And that's exactly what she was doing. As the days turned into weeks, Zuri's transformation continued. She no longer saw herself as an outsider. She no longer saw herself as the broken, fragile girl who had been torn from her home. She was Zuri, the girl who had survived, the girl who had found hope again. And as she grew stronger, she began to help the other children at the orphanage do the same. She shared her story, her strength, and her hope with them, just as Jack had done for her. One evening, the orphanage held a gathering to celebrate the progress the children had made. There were speeches, music, and food. The staff praised the children for their growth and resilience. But when it was Zuri's turn to speak, she simply stood before the crowd, her heart full, and shared the one thing that had kept her going, the story of humanity's resilience. The story of how even in the darkest of times there was always hope. "I was lost once," Zuri said, her voice steady and strong. "But I found my way back, and I know that no matter how hard life gets, I will always find my way forward. I will never forget my past, but it will not control me. I am strong, and so are all of you." The room was silent for a moment, and then a wave of applause washed over her. The children, the staff, even the visitors who had come to see the progress of the orphanage, all of them were moved by Zuri's words. And in that moment, Zuri knew that she had finally found her place. She had found her strength, her purpose, and her family. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led her to a place of peace. And for the first time in a long while, she felt truly at home. The days passed peacefully in the Xiron orphanage, and the warmth of the growing friendships and shared experiences began to settle in the hearts of all the children. Zuri had become a symbol of resilience, a beacon of hope for everyone who had crossed her path. Her story, her journey of overcoming fear and loss, had inspired not only the children but also the staff and even the visitors who came to witness the orphanage's progress. But though Zuri had come so far, there were moments when the past still lingered in the back of her mind. There were times when the memories of her destroyed home, the faces of the people she had lost, would return uninvited, like shadows creeping in from the corners of her mind. Those moments were brief, fleeting, but they still made her heart ache. She had learned to live with them, to acknowledge them without letting them consume her. She had learned that healing wasn't a straight line, but rather a journey that sometimes took unexpected turns. One afternoon, as Zuri sat under the shade of a tall tree, the wind gently blowing through the leaves, she felt the familiar sense of longing in her chest. She missed her home. She missed her family. She missed the life she had known before the war. For a moment, it felt as if everything she had fought so hard to overcome would come rushing back. But instead of letting the sadness take hold, Zuri closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She remembered Jack's words, the stories of humanity's resilience, the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. And she reminded herself that she, too, had that same strength. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning, she saw Jack standing beside her, his familiar smile lighting up his face. "You look deep in thought," he said gently, sitting down beside her. "Something on your mind?" Zuri nodded slowly, her gaze still fixed on the distant horizon. "I was thinking about my home. My family, it's hard sometimes, Jack, I miss them." Jack didn't say anything right away. He simply sat beside her, offering his quiet presence. He understood. He didn't need to fill the silence with words. He had seen the way Zuri had healed, how far she had come. But he also knew that the journey wasn't over. Healing was a process, and sometimes it required facing the hard truths, the painful memories. "I know it's tough," Jack said after a moment. "But you've come so far, Zuri, and every day you're moving forward. Your past is a part of you, but it doesn't define you. You are more than what you've lost." Zuri smiled faintly, grateful for his words. She didn't know what she would have done without Jack's steady presence in her life. He had been there when no one else had known how to help. He had shown her that even in the darkest of times, there was always light to be found if you knew where to look. "I know," Zuri said softly, her voice filled with a quiet strength. "I wish I could go back. I wish I could have saved them." Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did your best. None of this is your fault, Zuri. You are not alone anymore, and there's a whole world out here for you. A world that needs people like you, people who can face their past but still move forward with hope." Zuri took a deep breath, feeling the weight in her chest lift slightly. Jack's words had always been simple, but they had a way of cutting through the noise, getting straight to the heart of the matter. She had lost so much, but in the process she had gained something more, something invaluable. She had gained her own strength. Over the next few weeks, Zuri found herself continuing her journey of healing. The orphanage became more than just a place of refuge. It became a home, a place where she could build new memories, new friendships, and a sense of belonging. She began to feel more connected to the other children, more connected to her new life. And as her confidence grew, so did her sense of purpose. She wanted to help others who were struggling, just as Jack had helped her. One day, Zuri sat down with a group of younger children who had recently arrived at the orphanage. They were shy, hesitant, and unsure of what to expect in this new place. Zuri could see the fear in their eyes, the same fear she had once felt when she had first arrived. She knew how they felt, lost, alone, unsure of what the future held. "Hey, I know how you feel," Zuri said softly, sitting down beside them. "When I first came here, I didn't know anyone, I didn't know what to expect, but I learned something important." The children looked up at her, their wide eyes filled with curiosity. "I learned that even though we've been through tough things," Zuri continued, "we're not alone. We have each other, and sometimes just talking about it, sharing our stories, helps more than anything." One of the children, a small girl with dark green skin and large yellow eyes, shyly raised her hand. "You mean, you talk about your past?" Zuri nodded. "Yes, I do. It's hard sometimes, but it helps, and I think it can help you too." The children looked at each other, unsure. They had only been at the orphanage for a short time, but already they had experienced the pain of losing their homes, their families. Zuri could see the weight of their grief in their eyes, but she also saw something else, something she had once had herself, hope. She had found it in herself, and now she wanted to help them find it too. "I know it's not easy," Zuri said quietly. "But if you ever want to talk, I'm here. I promise you don't have to carry it alone." The children sat in silence for a moment, absorbing her words. Then one by one, they nodded. Zuri smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle in her chest. She had taken another step forward on her own journey, and in doing so, she had helped others take their first steps toward healing as well. As the days went by, Zuri continued to share her story with the other children. She told them of her home, of the life she had once known, and of the strength she had found in herself. She encouraged them to talk about their own experiences, to open up about their grief, their fear. And slowly, the orphanage became a place where children could heal together, where they could support each other, share their burdens, and find strength in their shared experiences. Zuri had found her purpose. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about helping others survive too. It was about using her story to inspire hope, to remind others that they could overcome even the darkest of times. One evening, as the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Jack found Zuri sitting outside, gazing up at the stars. She looked peaceful, content, as if the weight of her past had finally been lifted. "You've come a long way, Zuri," Jack said, sitting down beside her. Zuri smiled, looking up at the sky. "I know, it's been hard, but I think I'm finally okay. I think I've found my place here." Jack nodded. "You found your strength, and now you're helping others find theirs." Zuri looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Jack. You helped me see that there was more to life than my past. You helped me find the strength I didn't know I had." Jack smiled softly. "You found it yourself, Zuri. All I did was remind you of it." Zuri laughed quietly, her heart light. "I guess that's all any of us need sometimes, a little reminder." Together, they sat in the quiet of the evening, watching the stars twinkle above. The world felt peaceful, calm, as if all the pain and grief that had once weighed so heavily on Zuri had been replaced with a sense of hope, of possibility. She had come a long way. And no matter what challenges the future held, she knew that she would face them with the same strength, the same resilience that had brought her this far. The journey wasn't over, but Zuri was ready for whatever came next. With the support of those around her and the strength she had found within herself, there was nothing she couldn't overcome.